We certainly have all heard stories of workplace bullying, of toxic work environments. Some of the way recent layoffs have been handled have an element of toxicity to them. And of course, toxic relationships are something that a lot of people have experienced.
And I've seen that a few times where once you change your energy pattern, because you absolutely cannot change the energy or the behavior of the other person, but you can absolutely change your energy pattern and your feelings and your belief systems about what's going on to a more empowered place. And as you do that, you no longer match the bully.
You could be in a toxic situation and not even know it.
We often don't learn about or understand psychologically and emotionally what's going on in that dynamic, in that relationship. We're not emotionally intelligent around that because we haven't had the opportunity to learn. We just know that it doesn't feel good. There's something about this just doesn't feel right. Hello, and welcome to the Susan Squared podcast. I'm Susan Bushel, energy therapist.
And I'm Susan Van Klink, executive coach. And this is our podcast about navigating life shifts and consciously creating the change you want to see in your life.
We're so glad you could join us. Let's get started.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to those of you who are joining us for episode 2 of the Susan Squared podcast. This episode is geared towards talking about toxic situations and how to manage and navigate them successfully. In doing research for this conversation, in addition to life experience, one of the things that Susan and I talked about was just how pervasive toxic situations can be in our lives in terms of both personally and professionally. We certainly have all heard stories of workplace bullying, of toxic work environments. Some of the way recent layoffs have been handled have an element of toxicity to them. And of course, toxic relationships are something that a lot of people have experienced. So before we get started today, we're going to share a poll with everyone and just get a sense of who's joining us on the podcast today and what your experience is with toxic situations. So the first question, have you ever experienced a toxic situation? And the 3 possible answers: yes, I'm currently experiencing a toxic situation now. Yes, I've experienced a toxic situation in the past. And no, I haven't had the pleasure of experiencing a toxic situation in my life yet. And then once you've answered our first question, if you could join, answer, sort of, it's a multiple choice question. So is it family, work environment, school environment? Is it a toxic boss, a toxic friend, a toxic romantic partner, business partner, or some other toxic example that we haven't thought of yet? So we'll give everybody a little chance to weigh in, and then I will end the poll and try to share the results with everyone. What we're seeing so far is, not surprisingly, almost everyone that's on the podcast with us today have experienced some sort of toxic situation, either currently in the past. And about half the people joining us today are currently experiencing a toxic situation, and the other half are have a toxic situation in their past that they're talking about. And then the number one example of toxic situations is a toxic family member. So almost 80% of people who have experienced a toxic situation have experienced it with a family member, followed closely by a toxic work environment. And really, that doesn't surprise us. It's where we spend the bulk of our time, right? Family and at work. Almost half have had a toxic boss, a third a toxic friend, a couple a toxic romantic partner, and one lucky person joining us today hasn't experienced a toxic situation in their life at this point. So, Susan, when we talk about toxic situations at work and at home, what comes to mind for you as some of the things that people might be experiencing in a toxic situation?
Yeah, I think probably it's really important to define what we mean by toxic. And so that can be many different things to different people. But the bottom line is something just doesn't feel right about this relationship. There's something that feels uncomfortable, and in your gut or in your heart or in both, you're not sitting comfortably in this relationship. So some of the things that that we've listed off, and this may not even be an exhaustive list. It likely isn't an exhaustive list, but what we've come up with, and you can certainly add to this, is sort of starting with some of the nonverbal things like in the relationship that there's eye rolling or gestures of even behind your back, or, you know, slightly out of your peripheral vision, gestures of dismissiveness, signaling behind your back. There can be gaslighting, so various ways and shapes and forms of ignoring the other person or kind of giving the cold shoulder, as a sort of an old-fashioned term for it. Sarcasm, teasing, scapegoating, belittling, scolding, feeling scolded, or this person scolding you, demeaning the other person, hair splitting, but walking away, just simply sort of turning, ignoring and walking away, not listening or interrupting, using that person as a stress relief, a bite, sort of barking or biting or snapping verbally at the person, being hypercritical, micromanaging them, being judgmental, being dismissive, or making disparaging comments. And so that's just simply a shorter list, but you can get the idea of there's just something about this that doesn't feel right. And it's so important to trust your gut. I think it's probably also important to say that probably on that list, when we think about our own behavior, we've all done some of those things at certain times to certain people. So this is not just about the good guy, bad guy. This is about just kind of exploring what it feels like from both sides of the equation, and those descriptors, I think, really help us to understand what that looks like, because we often don't learn about or understand psychologically and emotionally what's going on in that dynamic, in that relationship. We're not emotionally intelligent around that because we haven't had the opportunity to learn. We just know that it doesn't feel good. There's something about this just doesn't feel right.
And I was going to say, on a basic level, any relationship that makes you feel unsupported, feel worse rather than better, where you might feel attacked, misunderstood, demeaned, those are suggestions that you're in some sort of toxic situation. And to Susan's point, it may not be persistent and ongoing, but when it is, there's a good chance it's having a negative impact on your mental health. And so you hear a lot about people who don't want to go to work or don't want to go to school or don't, sort of don't want to get out of bed because something is wrong and life it's not feeling good to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say, there's a really good cue is, are you feeling reluctant to be around that person? Do you avoid them? Do you feel unsafe when they're nearby? If it's, say, a work situation and they've walked into the room or into the facility, you're hyper aware of their presence. They're here, they've arrived, they've just pulled into the parking lot, they've just got home, you hear the key in the door and you're like, oh, that's the clue, isn't it? That's the clue. How does it feel inside me?
Right. Yeah. And it always goes back to the body, right? And really checking in with the body. I think of terms like makes my skin crawl or causes something in the pit of my stomach. The dread, I just recently wrote an article about the Monday morning dread that can happen when you're, in a toxic situation. And quite frankly, it could be something as simple as you're in the wrong job, you're in the wrong company, you're working for the wrong person. Those are potentially big things to fix, but fundamentally, it's just there's not a match between what you're doing, who you're doing it for, the environment that you're doing it in, and what your body is telling you is the right thing. I would also want to state that there is a fundamental expectation that employers provide a safe environment and an environment free of toxicity, free of bullying, free of these kind of negative toxic situations, but it doesn't always happen. And sometimes we get these pervasive cultures, right? The win at all cost cultures, the cutthroat environments, the the backstabbing that can happen if sort of these situations are left to fester. And so it's also really important that if we're aware of toxic situations in the workplace and we're in a position to address and do something about it, that we take that on and we take that seriously, because there are people that rely on work for their livelihood and can't necessarily make those changes for themselves. And I would say the same for a personal situation, sort of when you're in a toxic family situation, to make sure that you're thinking about how do I keep everybody safe, and what can I do about the situation. And we're definitely going to talk about that.
Yeah. I was going to say as well that we are rarely taught how to treat each other really well, whether that's in a workplace situation or in a personal situation. We are absolutely taught in our culture how to be competitive and how to try to stand out, be in front, show up as the best, be seen. And so that if we boil it down, or when we boil that behavior down, that distills down to the fear of not being good enough, the fear that we don't quite measure up. So quite often, if you look at the person that you are feeling uncomfortable around, and you can sort of be grounded enough to sort of observe them in a more neutral, emotionally more neutral place, you'll see that their treatment of you is coming from their feelings, and they may not be conscious of it, but their feelings that they don't measure up, that they are concerned about their position in the family dynamic, in the relationship, in the company, and they're worried that they feel they're on autopilot and think that they have to compete, and that involves pushing you down in various ways and forms.
Yeah, and I was going to bring forward the data that says almost half of people surveyed admit to being bullied in the workplace in some way, mostly by bosses, sometimes by colleagues, and even occasionally by subordinates. And a lot of, I think, that bully behavior, Susan, comes from exactly what you were just talking about, which is that need to compensate in some way and make ourselves bigger by making somebody else smaller. And we've talked about this a lot throughout the years, that sometimes it comes down to how our two energies are showing up with each other. And what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes you run into somebody along your travels who remind you of somebody from your past. And you react to them in a certain way, they react to you in a certain way. And that can create a toxic situation as well. That really, sort of the best thing you can do is excavate that and get to the bottom of it and understand what's causing that energetic mismatch, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. To use the term bully, because it's probably the clearest term for a lot of people, but the bully needs to bully for some reason. And quite often that's because they've had a far bigger bully in their past, in their lives. And so they've learned to cope by being, the dog that bares its teeth the most. They've learned to be on the attack and to make sure that they're not the low person. And there is an energetic match for those of you that understand, the human energy field. We can have a feeling, an energy in our energy pattern that, to no fault of our own, because we've had a situation in our past where we've been bullied, we react like it's like a very automatic trigger, and we react to bullying behavior in a way that is often submissive, and the bully picks up on that. It can even be nonverbal. It can just be an energy field. And you and I've talked about this a couple of times, Susan, where I was working with a person who was working for a firm, who loved her job, loved her career, and had been at the company for quite a long time. And she had a boss of about 5 years who'd been a continual daily bully towards her. It was amazing that she was still there, but she really didn't want to leave, but she was absolutely on the brink of resigning from this company. And we worked about maybe 3 or 4 sessions together, maybe 5, on what about that situation was so hurtful for her, and we sort of dove into the feeling, both at the body level but also in her remembered memory, what she could recall, and we basically cleaned up her energy pattern so that she no longer felt like a victim. She no longer felt like she was helpless to change this, or that she had no choice. She no longer felt like she had to tolerate the intolerable. And she called me up and said to me, "You're not going to believe this, but my boss got moved to a different department." And I've seen
Right.
that a few times where once you change your energy pattern, because you absolutely cannot change the energy or the behavior of the other person, but you can absolutely change your energy pattern and your feelings and your belief systems about what's going on to a more empowered place. And as you do that, you no longer match the bully, right? You no longer are a lock and key mechanism. You don't fit anymore. And that person will move on. Unfortunately, probably will move on to another situation where they magnetically locate another person who's willing to tolerate the intolerable. It's never to blame anybody for attracting that situation. And as a matter of fact, when you again step back and observe it, it's a gift for you to be called to actually work on that historical part for you, so that you can shift your energy into a more healthy signature, so that you are coming from a more comfortable, confident, and empowered place within your own energy field. And it's less and less likely that you will find yourself in another situation with somebody who's mistreating you.
It's that idea that the more work you do, the more grounded you become, the less triggerable you are, the less likely you are to run into somebody who has that energetic signature. Now, that said, there are a lot of people that start companies and, sort of become big in business because some level of how they operate helps them to be successful, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's through healthy and productive and collaborative means. Sometimes it's that win at all cost, sort of survival of the fittest, cutthroat type environment. And you end up, sort of having to fight to survive. And a lot of people will either become like the environment they're in and maybe at negative cost to themselves, or will leave that environment. You see high turnover in situations like that. Susan, we had a question in the Q&A. Is there sometimes a third party creating toxicity for two people? How would you answer that question?
What a great question. There's a part of me that wants to say yes, but I can't think of an example that I've run across. I would, oh, okay. I would say, for example, you've been raised by a mother who's a bully, very negative, very judgmental, very critical. You've never felt like you could please her, that you were lovable. You try to hide your faults because you know she's going to nitpick at them. But now you're an adult and you're having trouble with someone who's similar in the workplace. You've attracted a boss, or you've landed yourself in a position where you have a colleague or a boss who's doing the same kind of stuff. So I suppose that initial relationship, which is still currently going on as an adult, and I have seen that many times, where adult children are still tolerating the intolerable from their loved ones, from their parents, because they feel they don't have a choice, because, well, it's my mom, she's never going to change. It's my dad, he's never going to change. But absolutely, yeah, there can be. And I'm just thinking about like someone other sort of outside of the close circle. I'd have to think about that one. I actually
Well, an
don't.
example given is sometimes children, especially adult children, can pit parents against each other, and potentially create a toxic situation there. So that's one potential.
So like where one parent is degrading the other parent to their child. Is that
No,
that's
the other way around. The child is in some way getting,
uh
sort of agitating the parents against each other,
yeah.
or a step parent interfering with a father stepchild relationship, or parent stepchild
Yeah,
relationship.
absolutely. But again, that doesn't that boil down to somebody or all parties not feeling good enough,
Right.
not feeling that they are loved and appreciated and welcomed into the family just simply for who they are.
Yeah, and it always goes back to how someone acts and how someone reacts. right? Which I think is what we're going to talk about next before we invite people to come and potentially share an example or a story of a toxic situation that they've had to deal with in the past. And to talk through it together as we really delve into some examples. But one of the things that we had talked about, prior to coming onto the podcast, is the importance of being secure and grounded. And sort of, I know when I have been in toxic work situations, I spend a lot of time walking and meditating and tapping and sort of managing my energy as best as I possibly can, because I can't control the other person and what the other person is going to do, but I can control, hopefully, my reaction to them. And it takes a lot of energy. It's not easy. But there's definitely the feeling that I have that I need to control my reaction to the person who's potentially pushing my buttons.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna somewhat disagree with you there, Sue, on that. Because I have found that when people do the personal side of the work, and I don't mean just talking about the problem in talk therapy, but actually working with a practitioner, a social worker, psychotherapist, somebody who can help them with the feeling in their body, because what they're dealing with is shock, right?
Yeah.
So if you can process that shock, it's actually, I'm not going to say it's 100% easy peasy, you're going to just float through it. But if you can clean up the pain of your past, then it's far easier and more comfortable to, and I have a short list here that I think is really important. It's far easier for you to know what your values are and to be able to see where that person is breaching one of your important values in life. So what can you do to help yourself when you're in this situation? And I would say, if you are feeling like you have to control it, stop, pause, and write down, where is that? Why is that control needed? Why do I feel like I need to defend or pack or control? So I got sort of 5 or 6 ideas here. Number one being defining your values. What is important to you about this job? What is important to you about this relationship at this time? Number two, set an intention to create healthy boundaries that you believe in and that are in alignment with your value-based choices. So what's important to me and what boundaries are being breached, that the reason they feel uncomfortable is because they're not in alignment with what I find valuable for me in life. Number 3, remember that you always have choice, even when you feel like you don't have choice. That's very important. And when you're able to be less triggerable, more grounded and centered, you will recognize the opportunities for choice. Number 4, what decision will create the least negativity and the healthiest situation for me? So once we're fairly centered and grounded and we've cleaned up some of the pain of our past, the scoldings we've been through, the places where we felt like we didn't measure up, it's far easier for us to recognize what decision is going to create the least negativity and or the healthiest situation for me right now, even if it involves a choice that may have some challenges to it, but we can also make that feel a lot lighter and easier too. Number 5, remember to stay grounded, centered, and calm, despite how hard that may feel initially. So as Susan mentioned, daily walking meditations or sitting meditations, spending time in nature, doing energy exercises. Anybody who's keen on Donna Eden's energy medicine exercises, or brain gym, those kinds of options. And certainly, my favorite is EFT, emotional freedom techniques, or tapping, so that in the moment when something surfaces and I'm uncomfortable, we can tap that down and we keep cleaning that up and coming back to home base, coming back to that quiet place where I can recognize what's the healthiest situation for me. Where's my point of choice and opportunity? Do I need to tolerate this? Is this even a situation that I need to address? Or is it just that it's emotionally triggering me? And once I've calmed the trigger, I don't need to worry about the situation. That's always that's like the icing on the top of the cake when that happens. Oh my God, I was so worked up about that. but I actually don't have to really even do anything. And number 6, of course, is the big one, connecting to and staying connected to your own inner voice and your own inner wisdom, because it's always going to guide you safely, because it always has intention for your healthiest outcome. So it may turn out that you have a toxic situation at work and you do your background work, you do your emotional work, your emotional piece, your whole system winds down and calms down. Your nervous system is calmer, you're sleeping better, you're happier in life, you even noticing you're laughing and giggling more, and you are walking further and further towards health. But with that may also come the very, very clear recognition that this current position at this current company or this current relationship is no longer serving you, that you've grown through it and you're ready for a change. But the change will be much easier, and usually the next possibility or opportunity will arrive, will be more in alignment with where you are now in life. So it sometimes can, doing this work can kind of nudge you forward a little quicker than you were moving previously, which is often not a bad thing. And when you look back years later in hindsight, you'll go, yep, that was exactly the right move for me, even though it wasn't totally easy. It was exactly the right move at the right time for me. So it's important to recognize that we do have an energy signature, and we do have to take care of ourselves on an ongoing basis, so that those life shifts, which is kind of the big theme of what we're talking about on this podcast, is these life shifts happen with as much ease as possible.
And I'm just going to say one last thing before we invite people on stage with us to share their story and to potentially be part of the tapping around this subject, should you wish to participate in that way. And one of the things that is common in the research and common in both of our experiences is you could be in a toxic situation and not even know it. One of the things that often gets shared after the fact is, it wasn't until I got out of this situation that I realized how bad it was, or that I was in it, or that it was toxic. And sometimes the universe gives us a disguised gift in kind of helping us out of that situation without, sort of us being involved in that. And sometimes we just wake up one day and realize this isn't what I want. This isn't good for me. And I need to make some shifts and some changes. And so definitely the theme of this podcast is navigating life shifts and consciously creating change. And that's what we're here to help you to do. So is there anyone, any brave souls who have joined us today who would like to join us and talk about a toxic situation that you've experienced in the past? If you want to talk about a toxic situation that you're currently experiencing, our only request is that you do so in an unidentifiable way. If you would like to join us, great. If not, Susan and I are going to tap through some stuff from some of the toxic situations in my past, which are mostly work related. I'm happy to say, but they're not all work related. And, sort of, you can find toxic situations and, sort of lots of different ways. So if you want to raise your hand, if you know how to do that, or pick me in the Q&A, then we would be happy to invite you on screen with us. That's part of being a live and interactive podcast, is to, sort of bring people from the audience where everybody's hidden and anonymous and can't be seen by anybody onto the stage with us if there's a particular topic that you want to join us with. So we've got at least one volunteer, which is great. And I'm just going to give everybody a couple of more minutes. Anybody have a toxic past situation or possibly a toxic current situation that you would like to join and share with our podcast audience? And
what we're going to do is, if you haven't seen the first podcast, is what we're going to do is we're going to use EFT, acupressure for your emotions, and you're going to describe a little bit about what happened and how it feels, and then we're going to tap on the discomfort that surfaces. But everybody who's attending, I'm going to encourage you all to tap along, because you will then be addressing any toxic situations you've been in, even though I'm not actively working with you. This is what we call borrowing benefits, where one person will volunteer their experience and receive some help, and then everybody else is tapping along with it, using the words of the volunteer, but interestingly, we'll measure our work from time to time, and you will notice that the discomfort around your situation, even if it was decades ago, will feel lighter as well. So everybody, I am encouraging you all to take full advantage of tapping in a group like this. And always, like Sue said, nobody can see you, so you just tap along and enjoy the benefits.
Perfect. And I'm going to promote Corey to join us on stage. And if anybody else wants to raise their hand through the next 20 minutes or so, please feel free to do so. So Corey, I'm promoting you.
Yeah, I can work with more than one person at once. It'd be lovely to have 2 or 3, because then it's just, we'll have a very rich tapping session and robust. Hi, Corey.
Corey needs to unmute and hopefully come on camera with us if that's a possibility.
Okay, let me try. I'm on a new device and I don't know if I can come on camera with this.
If you mouse down near the bottom. Hey, there, wonderful.
Corey, welcome.
Look at you. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure thing. Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you volunteering, and it's lovely to see you. You're on a device. Is there any way that you can angle the device so that it's a little higher, or you will need both your hands? So I know that can be a little tricky, but I like to be able to see. There we go. That's better. That's much better. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So I'm going to grab a fresh piece of paper here. There we go. And I want you to spend just a couple of minutes, or even less, depending on how triggering this is for you. It's important to mention that you don't need to feel the full extent of how uncomfortable it was or is for you to be able to start working on it. And as a matter of fact, it's good not to kind of go, we measure on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being very uncomfortable and 0 being it's not an issue at all. So even though it may be a 10, you don't have to be feeling the 10 to work on it. That often sends us into a fight or flight reflex, which makes the tapping a little more challenging. But we want to kind of stick our big toe in. We want to kind of be connected to the discomfort, but not swamped in it, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So let me know, give me a little bit of a description of how it feels for you in this particular situation that you've experienced.
Okay, excuse me. So I'm going to try to articulate this without giving too much away, right?
Yeah. You have to be super careful. We don't want to identify anybody.
Okay, this is a current situation that I'm dealing with, but it's actually been probably 30 years happening. And I've reached a point where I'm acknowledging like the extreme toxicity, which is getting worse. So, and I've already done some work around this, so I'm not incredibly triggerable, but this is regarding one of my parents whose spouse, my parents are divorced. And so their spouse, they've been married now for over 30 years. This spouse has always been jealous of my parents' past, that my parent has kids from the first marriage, which I'm one of them. And this spouse, just by nature, is a jealous and more manipulative type personality. And as a result, my parent has always had to act in their spouse's best interest, protecting them and going along with what makes them comfortable.
So can I get you to just angle this slightly differently, if it's okay? Yeah, how does it feel for you to be in that relationship? So if you can kind of turn the mirror around on yourself.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So I feel like I am always the second choice. Like my needs never matter as much because I'm a stronger personality and I'm able to give unconditional love. And so I am essentially taken advantage of in some way if I'm the one that's making things easier for everybody and being a people pleaser.
Yeah. So I feel taken advantage of by this particular person, or
by my parent.
Okay.
It's by my parent who and obviously, I'm not a child. My parent is getting on in age and I increasingly don't feel safe in the relationship.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah. So pause there for a second. I just don't feel safe in the relationship. That feels true?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't feel safe in the relationship because, how would you finish that sentence?
I don't feel safe because my needs don't seem to matter to my parent.
Okay,
I'm essentially being blamed for what their spouse is struggling with.
yeah. And my needs need to matter because,
And my needs need to matter because I matter and I'm the person's child. And I love my parent and I have a love for their spouse.
Mhm.
And
Okay, ready to get tapping?
let's do it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love how truthful and honest you're being. That's absolutely the way to go in this situation. You do not have to sugarcoat anything when you're tapping. You get to tell it like it is. Obviously, I don't know you well. It's really important that you hold yourself emotionally safe. I want you to kind of identify just that 1 minute, 2 minute description of what's going on. How uncomfortable does it feel in your body right now, in the moment, in the present moment?
Oh, I'm pretty uncomfortable. I would say a 7.
Yeah, 7 out of 10. And where is that 7 feeling, by the way, in terms of location in your body?
Definitely through my chest and stomach.
Yeah. And stomach is above belly button or below?
Above.
Okay, so kind of in the solar plexus area, around a 7. Beautiful. Okay, so then just a reminder to everybody as well, that everybody else, you're holding yourself emotionally safe. Keep tapping if bigger discomfort comes up. You should not stop if you're in a highly sort of emotionally charged state. Just keep breathing, keep tapping, and keeping your eyes open. Even if we pause, you keep tapping until it subsides. Okay. I'm hoping everybody's fairly well hydrated, that you've got a glass of water, have a little sip. And while we're doing our setup together on the side of the hand, I'll be using Connie's words, but I want everyone else to kind of focus in on what they're experiencing about their toxic situation. And after we do the setup here, once we move to the eyebrows, the face and the torso, you'll be using Connie's words, and speaking out loud is really helpful.
And it's Corey, Susan. I know you can't read it well on the screen.
Oh, thank you. It's Corey, not Connie. Thank you. I actually wrote down Corey. Somehow it switched in my head.
It happens all the time.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So just repeating after me, Corey, and it's call and repeat. And everybody else, I'd love you to speak out loud. Obviously, we can't hear you, so you can speak out loud, and you can say Corey's words if they resonate, or you can say your own words. And it starts with, even though I have this feeling.
Even though I have this feeling.
And it's a feeling in my body.
And it's a feeling in my body.
It's in my chest and my solar plexus.
It's in my chest and my solar plexus.
I'm going to guess it's around a 7.
I'm going to guess it's around a 7.
And I deeply and completely.
And I deeply and completely.
Accept exactly how this feels for me.
Accept exactly how this feels for me.
Yeah. So super important that we don't pretend like it's not there, that we actually flush it out and allow it to be there and accept exactly how it feels. So even though I have this issue with an important person in my family.
So even though I have this issue with this important person in my family.
And I'm one of the first children in this family.
And I'm one of the first children in this family.
For a long time, I've felt like I don't matter since there's been a remarriage.
For a long time, I felt as if I don't matter since there's been a remarriage.
Yeah, yeah. And that my needs don't matter.
And that my needs don't matter.
And that I'm taken advantage of.
And that I'm taken advantage of.
That's a 7 for me.
That's a 7 for me.
Yeah, I can feel it right now in my body.
I can feel it right now in my body.
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
Even though I have this problem.
Even though I have this problem.
And it feels toxic.
And it feels toxic.
Feels kind of jealous and manipulative.
It feels kind of jealous and manipulative.
And I really just don't feel safe in this relationship.
And I really just don't feel safe in this relationship.
Because my needs don't seem to matter.
Because my needs don't seem to matter.
That's how it feels to me.
That's how it feels to me.
And I'm choosing to address this feeling now.
And I'm choosing to address this feeling now.
Beautiful. Awesome. So everyone else can just follow along, and we're going to tap on just the very inside edge of the eyebrows. I feel like I don't matter.
I feel like I don't matter.
And just take a nice deep breath. And beside the eyes, that feels like a real feeling to me.
That feels like a real feeling to me.
Correct, Corey? Feels real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it feels real to me.
Yeah. Under the eyes. And it's a big one. It's been around for a long time.
And it's a big one. It's been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Under the nose. I think I maybe have been feeling this for about 30 years.
I think I've been feeling this for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm. In the crease under your mouth. I think I've been feeling this way for about 30 years.
I think I've been feeling this way for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm. And then just under your collarbones, either side of your sternum. I feel like the second choice.
I feel like the second choice.
But I'm a first child family.
But I'm the first child.
Yeah. And I do not feel safe with this person.
And I do not feel safe with this person.
And I feel like they're manipulating me.
And I feel like they're manipulating me.
And my biological parent.
And my biological parent.
I have needs.
I have needs.
I'm their child.
I'm their child.
And I want my needs met.
And I want my needs met.
Mm-hmm. About right? Got it about right? Yeah, beautiful.
Okay.
In the middle of your sternum. They're my parent.
They're my parent.
And I want my needs met.
And I want my needs met.
This is really important to me.
This is really important to me.
And it's got pretty toxic between us over the 30 years.
And it's gotten pretty toxic between us over the past 30 years.
Yeah, beautiful. And under the arms, about 4 inches below your armpits. And I can feel that in my chest and in my solar plexus, in the top of my belly.
And I can feel that in my chest and then the top of the solar plexus in my belly.
Yeah, yeah. So just take a little breath here and come back to that original feeling, measuring it again, and everyone else can do the same with their original feeling. Unless you're still highly activated, keep tapping, but just kind of checking in with chest, heart space, and solar plexus. What number would you give it now, Corey?
6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
6, I feel a little relief.
Yep. So just in terms of defining it as clearly as we can, tell me a little bit more about the 6. In other words, tell me about what's left.
Well, I feel like going through and repeating what you said was very validating for how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like getting it out there was helpful. And I do feel like the movement and the tapping is releasing something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we're tapping, I know it sounds crazy, but we always focus on the discomfort because that's what we want to get rid of. I know in the regular world, you're walking around, you choose not to connect perhaps with the distress because you don't want to feel that distress. But when you're tapping, you do the opposite because that's what you want to let go of. So when you say you're still feeling, and I'm glad to hear that you feel validated and that it feels a little lighter. But when you tune into this dilemma in your life, this toxic relationship that's been around for a long time, when you tune into it again here, you're saying it's around a 6 still, and would love you to be able to tell me a little bit about the 6. Tell me what's left that still feels uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a hurt and a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Disappointment.
I feel hurt and disappointed because
I feel hurt and disappointed that my parent can so easily not still that parent can still make choices that don't seem to validate me and who I am and the good person that I am. And it's the feeling of being villainized when I've always been kind and not, like, specifically not manipulative.
Yeah, that's not who I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you're talking about the biological parent now?
The biological parent yeah, the narrative that they've chosen to accept does not reflect reality and who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And that hurts. And it makes me angry because it's not true.
I love it. That's why it hurts. Because it's not real. It's from your perspective, this is just not true. Yeah. So coming back up here, and everyone else, focus in on what's left for you. Like I was saying to Corey, focus in on what's still distressing while we do the setup here, and then you can let that go and follow along with the words I'm using with Corey. So even though I can still feel this in my chest and my solar plexus,
So even though I can still feel this in my chest and solar plexus,
what's left is this feeling of hurt and disappointment.
what's left is this feeling of hurt and disappointment.
Mm-hmm. Because my biological parent cannot make choices for me.
Because my biological parent cannot make choices for me.
It's like I don't matter.
It's like I don't matter.
I feel villainized.
I feel villainized.
And it's really not who I am at all.
And it's really not who I am at all.
I deeply and completely
accept
that this is exactly how I'm feeling.
Accept that this is exactly how I'm feeling.
Even though
there's
a narrative with my biological parent.
Even though there's a narrative with my biological parent.
That simply isn't true.
That simply isn't true.
They're accepting those lies.
They're accepting those lies.
And it hurts me to hear that.
And it hurts me to hear that.
And it hurts me to know it.
And it hurts me to know it.
And there's a lot of disappointment for me in my chest and my solar plexus.
And there's a lot of disappointment for me in my chest and my solar plexus.
I thought they would know that that is not who I am.
I thought they would know that is not who I am.
It's not true.
It's not true.
Even though they believe it is.
Even though they believe it is.
I know it isn't.
I know it isn't.
But they don't get it.
But they don't get it.
They're believing their narrative.
They're believing their narrative.
For some reason.
For some reason.
But the important part is it's hurting me.
But the important part is it's hurting me.
I feel hurt by their choice.
I feel hurt by their choice.
Because I thought I mattered.
Because I thought I mattered.
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
No matter what.
No matter what.
Beautiful. All righty. So coming back up to the eyebrows. I can't believe they believe that.
I can't believe they believe that.
Nice deep breath. Their narrative beside the eyes, their narrative is simply untrue.
Their narrative is simply untrue.
Under the eyes. And I thought that they would know that.
And I thought that they would know that.
Under the nose. Don't they know me at all?
Don't they know me at all?
Under the mouth. I thought they would know me.
I thought they would know me.
And know that I'm not that villain.
And know that I'm not that villain.
Under the collarbones. It hurts me that they're expressing this narrative.
It hurts me that they're expressing this narrative.
It feels toxic in my body.
It feels toxic in my body.
Hurt and disappointed.
Hurt and disappointment.
Beautiful. And then in the middle of your sternum, hurt and disappointment.
Hurt and disappointment.
Yeah. And under the arms, I just feel so hurt by them not knowing that that isn't true.
I just feel such hurt with knowing that it just isn't true.
Yeah. But they don't know that it's not true.
They don't know that it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming up to the eyebrows. I need them to understand this.
I need them to understand this.
But in 30 years, it doesn't seem like they're going to get it.
But in 30 years, it doesn't seem like they're going to get it.
Yeah. And I'm making an assumption here. Not too much has changed in 30 years.
Not too much has changed in 30 years.
Yeah. Under the nose. I feel like, what was the phrase you used? I feel like a second child. There it is. A second choice. I feel like a second choice.
I feel like a second choice.
Under the mouth. I feel like a second choice.
I feel like a second choice.
Yeah. When this parent repartnered.
When this parent repartnered.
About 30 years ago.
About 30 years ago.
I began to feel like a second choice.
I began to feel like a second choice.
And perhaps like I just don't matter.
And perhaps like I just don't matter.
And it's carried on all these years.
And it's carried on all these years.
Under the arms, and I really need them to get it.
And I really need them to get it.
I need them to know me.
I need them to know me.
And to remember the truth.
And to remember the truth.
That I'm just not that villain.
That I'm just not that villain.
That they're describing.
That they're describing.
And then just go to the very top of your head very lightly. I'm not that villain.
I'm not that villain.
And I'm not the second choice.
And I'm not a second choice.
But I feel like it.
But I feel like it.
And I'm working on that now.
And I'm working on that now.
I feel like this villain.
I feel like this villain.
Because that's what they say.
Because that's what they say.
That's what they believe.
That's what they believe.
It's so manipulative.
It's so manipulative.
And it is not true.
And it is not true.
But it feels true because it hurts me.
But it feels true because it hurts me.
Is that true? Is it fair to say that a part of you perhaps believes it and that's why it's hurting?
1000%.
Okay. I don't like to make the assumption on that, but
That's
and that's often why, right? The reason the bully or the toxic person is so effective is because there's a part of us, and it may just be a small part of us, but a small part of us believes what they're saying or what they're doing, or that believes we deserve that treatment. And then tapping in the middle of your sternum. Part of me is believing that narrative.
Part of me is believing that narrative.
I wonder why.
I wonder why.
A part of me is believing that narrative.
A part of me is believing that narrative.
But I wonder if I actually have to.
But I wonder if I actually have to.
But that's what they're saying.
But that's what they're saying.
And they're lying.
And they're lying.
I can't believe my parent believes this.
I can't believe my parent believes this.
They seem to.
They seem to.
And it hurts.
And it hurts.
It absolutely hurts.
It absolutely hurts.
And it's disappointing.
And it's disappointing.
And I'm wondering if the part of me.
And I'm wondering if the part of me
that's been believing this for a while.
It's been believing this for a while.
Maybe even 30 years.
Maybe even 30 years.
Can begin to shift that belief.
Can begin to shift that belief.
On a far deeper level.
On a far deeper level.
I wonder if that part of me.
I wonder if that part of me.
That began to believe that I'm second choice.
That began to believe that I'm second choice.
Or that the truth about me doesn't matter.
That the truth about me doesn't matter.
Can begin to shift.
Can begin to shift.
Because there is a part of me.
Because there is a part of me.
My adult self right now.
My adult self right now.
That knows that this narrative isn't true.
That knows that this narrative isn't true.
I'm not the villain.
I'm not the villain.
I'm not second choice.
I'm not second choice.
But a part of me believes it.
But a part of me believes it.
That's not true.
It's not true.
But it feels true.
But it feels true.
Yeah. So you see what we're doing there is we're playing with the energies of the two belief systems, right? There is a part of you that knows you're a wonderful person, you're a great child in this relationship, adult child, but that you're a good person and you're valuable. And then there's this other part that's responding to these words of maybe jealousy or hatred or manipulation or judgment, whatever it is. And so we're deactivating the belief that believes the distress, that believes the falsehood. There was a time where you really believed that, and then that's carried forward because it's still in, like we said, it's still in your tissues. The shock of that belief is still in your body and in your tissues and in your nervous system. So as we tap on it and we play back and forth between the old belief and the new belief, the healthier belief and the distressing belief, which has a lot of power at first, and we play with that and honor it and really allow it to be there, it begins to dissipate. starts to lighten up. But however, it could still be a 6. It could even be higher, right? And this is all just information for us about what's going on. But I want you to kind of come back to that original, how did we get there? I don't feel safe in this relationship because my needs don't seem to matter. I matter and I'm their child as well. How painful does that feel? Not how much do you think that's still true, but how painful does that feel in your chest? We're going to obviously measure the same feeling. There's probably more than one feeling around this situation, but we want to try or do our best to come back to that feeling in your chest and in your solar plexus.
Yeah, I feel like it's come down to a 4 or a 5. Your approach really resonates with me, with the exploring, like the icky feelings of, on some level, believing or afraid that they're true.
Yeah.
False, true. Like that's 100. I mean, that's so true. That's so what's happening here.
That's right. So tap on the top of your head. It feels true on some level.
It feels true on some level.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But I also know that it's not true.
I also know that it's
This isn't 30 years ago.
This isn't 30 years ago.
And maybe I started to believe this about myself.
Maybe that's when I started to believe this about myself.
And it's been reinforced over many, many incidents over the last 30 years.
It's been reinforced over many incidents over the past 30 years.
But I wonder if it's really true.
I wonder if it's really true.
Still feels true.
Still feels true.
At least about a 4 or a 5.
It's about a 4 or a 5.
But I'm working on it now.
I'm
open to the possibility.
I'm open to the possibility
that I'm choosing to feel differently about myself.
That I'm choosing to feel differently about myself.
And I'm choosing to remember.
And I'm choosing to remember
that how this person and even my biological parent feels about me.
And I forgot the first
Sorry,
one.
that was grammatically kind of clumsy. I'm choosing to remember.
I'm choosing to remember that how this person and my biological parent feels about me.
Is how they feel.
Is how they feel.
And I get to choose how I feel.
And I get to choose how I feel.
Not just what I think.
Not just what I think.
But how I feel about me.
But how I feel about me.
Because I know unequivocally that I'm not a villain.
Because I know unequivocally that I'm not a villain.
I mean, there's a part of me that knows deeply that I'm not a second choice.
There's a part of me that knows deeply that I'm not a second choice.
Knows that I'm a kind person.
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 Despite whatever they say.
Despite whatever they say.
Yeah. And I'm open to the possibility.
And I'm open to the possibility.
That I am already shifting.
That I'm already shifting.
How I feel about me.
How I feel about me.
And how much hurt I feel.
And how much hurt I feel.
No matter what they do into the future.
No matter what they do into the future.
I love these people.
I love these people.
And they're important to me.
And they're important to me.
But my relationship with myself.
But my relationship with myself.
Is more important.
Is more important.
Yeah. Despite the fact.
Despite the fact.
That I believe I have needs they still need to meet.
That I believe that I have needs that they still need to meet.
Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. There's still some needs.
There's still some needs.
That I need them to meet.
That I need them to meet.
I'm open to the possibility.
I'm open to the possibility.
There might be an easier way.
There might be an easier way.
Because I'm held in this discomfort.
Because I'm held in this discomfort.
Waiting for them to meet my needs.
Waiting for them to meet my needs.
What if they can't?
What if they can't?
What if they never can?
What if they never can?
What if it never shifts for them?
What if it never shifts for them?
It can shift for me.
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 And maybe not all here and now in this moment, but we're heading in the right direction, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're
Magically.
peeling the onion, right? So probably what we would do in a session, we would then go back and talk a little bit about what happened 30 years ago, the time around the separation of your original parents, and any stories you had about feeling possibly like you weren't good enough or you were rejected in some way, and clean up the shock of that time in life, which, you know, obviously for many can be a very challenging situation when our original parents go in different directions, and we'll clean that up, and you'll become more and more, you will need the approval of them less and less, and you'll recognize more and more that you can meet those needs and that you can have a relationship with each of them, even if it's not perfect, right? You can take back controls, but you put your hands back on the controls of how you feel about your relationships with them, and it's in your hands now, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. I'm so grateful.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
when you come, sorry, I interrupted you there. Sorry.
No, I just said thank you. I mean, this is
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
almost unbelievable.
Yeah. Come back to that original statement. And I don't expect it to be a 0, because there's maybe a little more work to do here, but I just don't feel safe in this relationship because my needs don't seem to matter. Just say that out loud for me. And I know it sounds funny, but try to own it again. Try to own the feeling that comes with it, and we'll measure before we.
Okay. I don't feel safe in this relationship because it seems that my needs don't matter.
Still painful inside?
No.
Mhm.
3.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, it's like I do feel like I have control back.
Yeah. You do. You're an adult, right? It's like, even children have some degree of choice, although they do rely on their parents for survival. But just for fun, I'll just do one last thing with you, and everybody else can go along with this. Just tapping between your last 2 knuckles here in the back of your hand, Corey, and you're going to roll your eyes across the floor away from you, up the wall across from you, and then looking up at the ceiling. You don't need to tip your head back, just looking up at the ceiling. Take a deep breath in and hold. And then keep tapping for a moment. And then relax. Right. Beautiful. Okay. That helps to kind of clean up those leftovers when we've got a 1 or a 2. But just, drink some water. Stay well hydrated over the next 12 to 24 hours. And if there's any leftovers, any there's another piece to this, another chapter, just write that down and bring it into a tapping session, or tap for yourself and clean that up. And you free yourself.
Well, wonderful. And just, I guess one last thing that I'd just like to share is that what's amazing about this is you helped take the emphasis off of these other people and the toxicity that they've created, and it really put it back on me in a safe way, in a way that feels authentic.
Yeah. You've adopted their perspective because of the pain. That's how trauma works. That's how the nervous system works. And I could have talked to you about that, but it won't shift a single thing in your nervous system, because where that shock sits is in the amygdala in the brain, and there's no neural connection between the thinking, talking brain and the emergency centers of the brain. So when we have a situation that feels really painful and kind of shocky, it just saying positive affirmations or giving yourself a pep talk only gets you so far, because it doesn't land where the original software glitch happened in your brain. And so you have to use techniques that address and know how to get to that place in the brain. And that's what EFT is particularly adept at doing. So I want to thank you so much for joining us, and that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I hope other people who are on the call or who are listening to the recording were tapping along with us. And as we said at the beginning, please hold yourself safe. And if this has stirred up something a little bigger than you imagined, keep tapping, keep breathing, have a few sips of water. And if you're not able to, you should be able to bring that down if you keep tapping. But if it stirs up things that are a little bigger than you thought, then reach out to your mental health care provider and get the help that you need. It's always, even though it may not feel like it in the moment, it's always a gift to know that there's some distress there, because now you've got an opportunity to really look it over and address it and calm it down and let it go, so that you don't have to carry it around for the rest of your life.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks for being our
Thank you.
attendee today. We appreciate it. I'm going to send you back to the anonymity of the crowd. But the one thing I do want to share with everyone is, as both a stepchild and a step parent, it really is a difficult scenario to navigate well, and toxicity can come up, whether it's intentional or unintentional. There's lots of complex emotions and dynamics, and you take family dynamics and you extrapolate even further. So it's a great example, I believe, of, sort of how toxic situations can grow and evolve and develop over time. I also felt, and Susan, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, listening to Corey's story, that there was a little bit of gaslighting going on there on the part of their step parent, in terms of how they were being portrayed and positioned in the family and with the biological parent. And that, I believe, that feeling of what they're saying about me is just not true, or how they're portraying me is just not true, goes so deeply to our sense of identity and who we are, and that feeling of anger and frustration that somebody would even think that of us, and I see that a lot in the workplace, that somebody gets mischaracterized by somebody else, and how painful that can be. So I think, whether it's your personal family situation or it's your work situation, I think it's a great example of when somebody's saying something about you that you don't believe or is untrue, it can be very painful.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember always that with those first family situations, it's primal. It is primary, first attachment, first loves. So there isn't a person that I've worked with that hasn't had to, on some level, address pain from those first parents, from our original caretakers. No one's perfect. We don't expect parents to be perfect. We all have off days. We all come with our own history and our own baggage. But the lovely thing about this is, no matter who it is or how primary they've been in our lives, we can free ourselves from the discomfort and recognize, come back to our own place of self-love and self-empowerment, and value ourselves. We got a little lost. It's easy to fall off the path when these bigger situations happen in our lives, when we're laid off, when a love partner leaves us, when we lose someone, or when we're in a situation when there's a divorce and a repartnering. But we can, in the moment, when we're young and we have an immature brain, we're just doing the best that we can. And then later on, as adults, we have the opportunity to address that pain, so that we don't bring it into our current relationships, whether that's at work or at home. We want to free ourselves from any of those limiting beliefs.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great place to end episode 2, navigating toxic situations. We hope everybody got some good information, learned something today, got the benefits of tapping along. Even if you didn't recognize your toxic situation in Corey's story, I can tell you that tapping along with Susan and Corey will have eased something in your current situation as well, if that was where you were focused. So excited about next month. We'll be doing this again Tuesday, February the 14th, and we'll be talking about what to do when you're stuck, and lots of different ways we can get stuck in life. And sometimes it feels like we're in a situation we can't find our way out of. And tapping is a great way to address like that feeling of stuckness, and help us open up our brain and our body to new ideas and calmer emotions. Anything else, Susan, that you want to share before we say goodbye to everyone who was wonderful enough to join us today?
Yeah, I suppose I should mention, which we haven't done so far. If anybody wants to learn a little bit more about tapping, there is a really great free resource. I'm an EFT trainer with EFT International. It's a global nonprofit training organization, and they have a free manual. They have a link where you can download the manual. So if you go to EFTinternational.org, and there's bars across the top, there'll be a drop down and under resources, I believe, and you'll see free EFT manual. And I recommend it to all my clients and all my students. Just click on that. I think it's a PDF. Yeah, it's a PDF. Just save it and then print it up for yourself, read through it, and it'll give you a really good start if you're brand new to tapping, or if you're just somewhat new and you want to make sure that you're doing everything accurately. So that's a good easy resource for everybody.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope you got value out of it, and we look forward to seeing you next month
Yeah.
on the Susan Squared podcast. Thank you all. And
Thank
have a
you.
great